Belfast with Love, a story about the children of Northern Ireland and how some of them spent their summer vacation.
Thomas and Stephen Madden's father was murdered, their uncle tortured to death. Mark McCormick's brother was shot and killed. Mari Jean Gilbery lives on Leeson Street, where soldiers are afraid to go. Leslie McCloy and Graham Bailey know not a single Catholic boy and don't understand why. The last time Noel McKee and Hugh Doran walked across this field, they think they were shot at. Anne-Marie Connery had a close call, too.
You know, when she was out playing one day, you know, she was nearly hit with a rubber bullet.
Children of Belfast, a city in the process of walling itself into sections and torturing itself. Needing playgrounds, it spends its money instead on police and buses to keep children of a Catholic school on one side of the street from crossing paths with children of the Protestant school on the other for fear they'll fight. Needing houses and jobs, homes and shops are bombed by extremists or abandoned by terrified occupants. Needing an end to the hatred between Catholics and Protestants, Belfast gets British soldiers, and all three factions learn to hate each other. After 5 years, these conditions become a way of life that must seem almost normal by now, especially to children who have seen little else. Why not, thought some Rotarians in Hibbing and some people here in Belfast, why not let as many children as possible see a different way of life? 120 children, both Catholics and Protestants, were chosen to spend 6 weeks with families in Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Wisconsin.
The Turf Lodge section of Belfast, a working-class neighborhood, lower to middle income, 100% Catholic. The Scottish soldiers who patrol it consider this section one of the breeding grounds of the Provisional IRA, the outlawed extremist organization. They patrol it heavily, search cars, houses, and people, watch it through tower telescopes. One information officer says, "We know where everyone in Belfast is at all times." That's absurd, but the very fact that the security forces would like that to be true gives one a prickly feeling of being watched and suspected of something. Hugh Doran and his family live in this neighborhood. Hugh's friend, Noel McKee, is going to Mass with them. Noel's father is off to the pub. On Sunday, there is usually less patrolling and less searching, and fewer bombs are planted. 1 day a week of near sanity. The soldiers and the troubles are not much on the minds of Anne-Marie Connery and her family today anyway. They're too excited about Anne's trip to America in just 5 days. But Father Patrick McWilliams speaks with barely controlled anger of the soldiers tramping through his parishioners' homes. He says they must bear it.
We have the strength, we have the grace to handle the crosses that are sent, to handle them with a smile. We get it from our prayers. What I would say to you guys, each of us need to pray every day for the grace to carry the cross when it comes.
Even as Father McWilliams speaks, soldiers are raiding a house in the next block. 5 members of the family there, including a 15-year-old girl, are reported arrested. Citizens of Northern Ireland may be imprisoned indefinitely without trial on suspicion. It's a common belief that many are tortured. Rocks zing past the soldiers' heads as they leave. Hugh and Noel say they never stone the soldiers, but that all their friends do. Hugh Doran's father, Jimmy, works in Belfast's brewery as a mechanic. It's a good job. The brewery has the reputation of being the only large industry in Belfast that gives Catholics an even chance at employment. Even if the others did, they're in Protestant sections of town where Catholics are afraid to go. The Connerys believe Anne-Marie was chosen to go to America by her school because she's a hard worker. Other families were told their children's names were picked out of a hat. But it's no coincidence that the Connerys and all the families of those chosen to go seem to be moderates, sick of Northern Ireland's violence.
I work in the hospital, and when there's a road accident comes in, or if it's a bad accident, people just, like the nurses don't just run and ask, what are you? Are you a Catholic or a Protestant? They just run to do all they can to help them. This is the way I can't understand what it's all about.
Well, sometimes there's shooting. Not really nothing else, just sometimes shooting.
What does it make you feel when you see or hear things like that?
Nervous.
Nervous? Scared? Sad? You seem very happy, though.
Because I'm going away.
Because she's going away.
We asked Anne Marie to sing a Northern Irish folk song. Possibly a Western Northern Irish folk song. If Noel McKee and Hugh Doran weren't going to Minnesota, they'd spend the summer watching television, playing soccer in a small patch of weeds, and swimming. There's an admission fee to the swimming pool, but if a child lacks the fee, he can quick climb the fence. The man collecting the money always sees this happen, but he smiles and looks away. In a nearby section of Belfast known as Upper Crumlin, a middle-class Protestant neighborhood, the troubles seem scarcely to exist. Soldiers are seldom seen. Houses and cars rarely searched. The troubles, the violence, are not mentioned at school.
I lay out in the sun, but it was no good. I couldn't get a suntan.
The recital of each child's weekend is a Monday ritual. Each diary sounds alike. I got up, I ate, I went swimming, I went to bed.
I had my supper, then I went to bed.
Next year, before Deborah and the others in her class leave Wheatfield Primary School, they'll take a test. Those who score high will then go on to grammar school, the preparation for the university. The rest will go to secondary school, preparing them for a trade. One test at age 11 to decide the course of their lives. Whichever type of school they go on to, it'll be segregated just as the primary school is, Protestants only. Catholic schools have an almost identical sifting process. The 6 Wheatfield school students chosen to go to Minnesota were assigned to research the state. Leslie McCloy reported that Minnesotans' hobbies are football, farming, basketball, swimming, and rodeo riding, not forgetting golf and tennis. And Jacqueline Anderson wrote that Minnesota is famous for its snowmobiles and for Lucky Linda, with an A. Jacqueline is fortunate. Her father has a good job with the telephone company, and they belong to a private tennis club. Not all Protestants are so insulated from the troubles. As a general rule, the lower the income, the closer the violence and danger. 11-year-old Mark McCormick lives in one of the narrow, cheerless row houses in a working-class Protestant section of Belfast called the Schenkel. Catholics rarely venture here, especially at night. A short walk from the McCormick's house is a Protestant shopping center, which is one of the IRA's favorite targets for bombings. The owners of the buildings have grown almost blasé about the bombings. They begin at once calmly cleaning up their shattered storefronts. It's the 4th big bomb in this one block. 2 bombs have exploded in Mark McCormick's block. There was bloody fighting in his neighborhood, too. A swath of abandoned buildings nearby, where Catholic and Protestant sections once overlapped, forms one of the ironically named peace lines, which now carve up Belfast into enclaves. During one of the gunfights, Mark's 18-year-old brother was struck by a stray bullet and killed. In spite of that tragedy, or perhaps because of it, Mark's mother meets more or less on the sly with a group of Catholics each week for prayer, and in a somewhat feeble attempt to close the sectarian wounds. Religion permeates the McCormick's lives.
So we all get down and pray here in this room, and we asked the Lord, would he let Mark go to America? And we completely forgot about it. Until about a fortnight later, Mark came in and he said that Mr. Simpson, the headmaster, had come into the classroom. And he said, now boys, I hope you're all sitting with your fingers crossed because we're going to pick the names. And he put his hand in and pulled out the form, and it was Mark McCormick.
While the McCormicks prayed that Mark might go to Minnesota, Mary Jean Gilvery was dreaming about it. Mary Jean lives on Leeson Street, deep in the Catholic ghetto, where the fighting once approached the level of war. where 30 houses squeeze into one block without plumbing or yards or any place for children to play but the street. Northern Ireland's version of urban renewal is tearing down most of the buildings not already destroyed by bombs. One can feel the anger of this neighborhood. Mary Jean's lunch usually consists of a cup of tea. Probably because the camera was there today, her mother found her a roll and an apple. She wants to be a veterinarian. Not very likely. She's taken her primary aptitude tests and has been assigned to secondary school. The Ivy Leaf, until last year, a fruit and vegetable market. Its proprietor, Hugh Madden, stepped outside the shop one day to retrieve a football for neighborhood children and was shot dead by a sniper. His widow closed the shop.
Sing us a song.
When her twin sons, Thomas and Stephen, are present, she speaks of their father's death, if at all, as an accident.
You see, this is an
2 months
opportunity for your
after
son.
Hugh Madden was shot, his brother Thomas was tortured to death. Both killings are thought to have been the work of Protestant extremists.
Are you bitter? Do you feel some?
No.
You're not bitter.
No, not bitter at all, dear.
Not toward the Protestants.
No, no, dear.
Your sons will be traveling with some Protestants, and when they get to Minnesota, they'll be playing with people who probably won't know or care whether they're Catholic or Protestant. Is that good or bad?
That's great, dear, I think, because that's the way it should be always here. It's not everyone you know's terrorists in this country.
The Maddens live on Old Park Road, a bitterly contested border between Catholics and Protestants. Catholics on the Madden side of the street, Protestants on the other. Up and down the street and on the side streets are vacant houses, some burned out, others being sealed up by their owners with cinder blocks to wait for the day no one seems to really expect will ever come, when the feuding and the violence ends. If the horrors in their past have damaged the Madden twins, it doesn't show. They're high-spirited, quick to laugh, and a trifle mischievous.
And he ran away with Fred, so when his uncle came looking for him. So when he found him, so the wee lad was crying. So when the uncle took him home.
You really enjoyed it then?
Yes.
What was the reason it was called the Forbidden Bridge?
So he wasn't allowed over it.
The boy's parents didn't allow him?
Thomas is the scholarly one and the artist of his class. Stephen, the football player. In happier times, their school, St. Columban's, played football against the neighboring Protestant school, Finiston. Now, buses must carry Finiston students past Catholic streets and St. Columban students past Protestant streets for safety. For a while, after the troubles flared up, the students were escorted by soldiers in armored cars called lollipop patrols. But half a dozen soldiers were killed on this duty. Buses replaced the soldiers, at the urging of Finiston's principal, David Russell.
Oh, she's gorgeous.
David Russell is the main Belfast connection in preparing the 120 children for the trip to America. Russell sees the schools of Belfast, his school anyway, as more than an education mill, as a sanctuary for the children from the unhappiness of Northern Ireland.
We're always in good spirits here, of course, because there's a tremendously happy atmosphere in the school. Although if you look in the environment of the school here, you see it's pretty depressing. So I suppose we try to counteract the depressing surroundings of the school by setting out to be cheerful. Your kids in the States, they can go off to the nearest cinema and see a film. These children can't. All the picture houses are shut. And even to play an innocent game of football, we just can't do that in this district. We have to bus the children out of the district to a safer area in order to play football. And they are confined literally to the ghetto at night with very few outlets. They're going to find all these barriers suddenly drop away from them when they get to the United States, and they're going to experience a rare freedom of movement, where after all they see around here are bricks and concrete. And when they get out to the open spaces of Minnesota, I'm quite certain that some of them will become little wild horses.
There's Andrew Bowden here.
Here.
Andrew, just remember your number 70. You'll get it later. Leslie McCloy.
Here.
Graham Bailey.
Here.
Sandra Looney. Deborah McCappin.
Well, I'm really thrilled the boys going and they were picked. Great. And I hope to sing them a lot of good Irish songs.
Their parents must say goodbye to the children at a downtown bus station. Only passengers are allowed inside the airport terminal.
It was sad seeing my mommy, like, wondering how she was being home.
At the airport, some final indignities to remember. Seeing all the children together, all in new clothes and excited, one is struck by what extraordinarily charming children they are. Small and slight for their ages, most of them, the girls very quiet and respectful. But hardly the vacant-eyed, dispirited urchins one might expect to emerge from 5 years of Northern Irish warring.
I have a theory that children trouble seems to wash over them. We had one case here of a rocket being fired at the school, and there was one hell of a bang. And I would say this entire school had settled back to work within 30 seconds. So that when I hear psychologists, skull shrinkers, psychiatrists, making all sorts of erudite forecasts about what's happening to the kids in Northern Ireland, I'm afraid that their opinion strikes me as a very dull thud.
If the departure from Belfast was hectic, the reception awaiting the children at Twin Cities Airport was little short of a mob scene. 120 sets of host parents with their own children, each family looking for a child they've never seen before. But somehow each travel-weary Irish child found a host family and vice versa. And after the first awkward moments of welcome and introduction and some forced laughter all around, the good part of the vacation was ready to begin. The first thing Mark McCormick wanted was a baseball mitt, though he'd never played the game. Within a week and a half, he was Little League material. Where'd he get an arm like that in Belfast, someone wondered? Throwing rocks?
I thought it was quite easy at first. Playing it, just hit the ball, but when I go over it, it's a bit harder.
Lutheran minister Lauren Fevig of Park Rapids, Mark's host, says at least half the neighborhood kids Mark's been playing with are Catholic. But Mark probably doesn't know or care which is which.
Where the hit, Mark?
He is really fit into our family and loosening up and seems to be really enjoying himself, and it's really a thrill to have Mark in our family.
What's the biggest difference you've found between America and Ireland?
The size of the cars, and mostly all the houses have gardens, and in Ireland they're just all attached to each other and there's no room for gardens.
The kids different?
Not really, except for the way they speak. That's about the only thing.
Leslie McCloy stayed with the William Hills of Bemidji. Like some other hosts, the Hills found their Irish guests to be so well-behaved and cheerful, they wondered if their own children might be bad influences. Most of the Irish youngsters seemed to spend the bulk of the 6 weeks partially submerged. In selecting host families, the Hibbing Rotary Club had looked for people living in the country and near lakes. In Grand Rapids, Noel McKee worked doggedly at learning to water ski. Doggedly, but not very successfully. The Robert Liebels treated him as one of the family, all right, just as they'd been encouraged to do. They assigned him the evening dishes. Woman's work, Noel decided, and ran out the back door. Anne-Marie Connery spent the 6 weeks sightseeing, traveling, sailing, and putting on weight. Other children developed passions for peanut butter or cantaloupe. Anne-Marie discovered steak. Her worst experience here, she said, was when her steak was burned. Jacqueline Anderson in Minnetonka learned to ride a horse with expert help from Linda Pearson. There were picnics in the children's honor and twins baseball parties, and some of them became nationwide television and newspaper celebrities. But nobody had more fun than Thomas and Stephen Madden. Lakeshore Cottage near Hibbing, swimming, speedboating, motorcycling, and the solid affection of what might possibly be the friendliest family in the state. John and Kathy Ryan, and their 7 children.
You get chocolate all over it.
Oh, now we were going boom, boom, and Thomas went down, and the whole bed went down, and I came down.
Before a week of the Ryans' hospitality had passed, Stephen Madden announced that he would not return to Ireland, that he would take a job in Minnesota, sending for his mum to join him. But the Maddens and all the others had to go back, taking with them as much of Minnesota as they could carry. To an American's way of thinking, the prospect of returning to Belfast after such a vacation might seem a dreary one, like soldiers having to return to the front after furloughs. But these kids seemed in no great agony as they queued up for the flight back. Sad as they were to have such an idyllic summer end, most of them were also anxious to get home.
I'd like to see my mum again in Belfast. So would I.
You think you'll come back sometime?
Yeah.
With your mama?
Yeah.
Sarah Hughes of Belfast, who'd conceived the idea for this vacation, was not satisfied with the way it turned out. Not enough children, she said, and not the poorest children. She's planning for 1,000 to go to California next summer. But Nancy Timmerman of Hibbing, who'd run this project, was elated with it.
Certainly lived up to every expectation I think the project and those families had, and I think more so. And they're very adult children to have adjusted so rapidly, and they rolled with the punches just beautifully.
So the experiment ended, with sad children, even sadder summer families. Aside from suntans, new peanut butter addictions, and memories, what did it all amount to? There are a couple of psychologists in Northern Ireland who say the answer to that is nothing, that the troubles will be waiting for the children back in Belfast. They'll reassume their sectarian lives, again be captives of their hostile environment. That those who have spent 6 weeks in plush surroundings and who must now return to tiny houses to play in the streets will be victims of culture shock. Even Belfast's eternal optimist, school principal David Russell, had no illusions that the vacation would work miracles.
I'm not particularly worried about the aftermath when they come home, because children are so resilient that they may feel a contrast for a while, but they'll come back into the general wavelength of things here and reassume their school life.
And go back into their enclaves?
This is the sad thing.
Sad indeed. But it must count for something that the Belfast children now know there are people in America pulling for them. And maybe the publicity that went with this children's holiday will help shame the extremists and politicians and employers of Northern Ireland and England into some sense. For it's obvious that these children, any children, should not have to live amid gunfire and bombings, seeing fathers and brothers murdered, neighbors arrested. They should be tossing baseballs, riding horses and bicycles, water skiing, swimming. They should be living.
Next week, a close-up look at the private lives of prostitutes and pimps as we examine widespread prostitution in the Twin Cities and the white slavery highway that arcs from the Nicollet Mall to the after-hours clubs of New York's Harlem. We call it Have Girl Will. Next week on More on Sunday. I'm Dave Moore.